back in. Today we're discussing our Week 13 must-start defenses and kickers of the week. Let's start with our top defenses, and we're going to start with the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks have been one of the best fantasy defenses this year, though they did struggle last week, surprisingly, to the Titans. Sometimes the NFL just doesn't really make any sense, and things like this happen. Either way, the Seahawks finished with 4 fantasy points for the DST 21. Next up is a great get-right spot, though, against the Vikings. J.J. McCarthy is in concussion protocol and will likely miss this week. That means Mac Brosmer, the undrafted quarterback out of Minnesota, is going to make the start here. The Seahawks should have a field day. The Vikings already allowed third most fantasy points to opposing defenses. That's why the Seahawks are my number one defense of the week. Let's keep moving. Let's move over to our top streaming options. And we're going to start with the Chargers against the Raiders. Coming off their Week 12 bye, the Chargers get a great matchup. The Chargers defense have been a run funnel this season. Overall, they allow 4.7 yards per carry and nearly 1.5 touchdowns per game on the ground. However, they have been elite against the pass. The Chargers allowed just a 60% completion percentage, 6.3 yards per attempt, and 172.3 yards per game. All of that, which rank inside the top 4. Next up for the Chargers, though, is this matchup against the Raiders, who have been terrible. The Raiders as a team have had many issues, one of the biggest one being their offensive line. Earlier in the year, they lost star left tackle Colton Miller, and then a few weeks ago, they lost Jackson Powers-Johnson, leaving this offensive line devoid of any real talent. And they also refuse to play any of their rookies. One of the big reasons why the Raiders are only accumulating 3.6 yards per carry, which ranks 31st, and their 81.4 rushing yards per game ranked 30th. Through the air, they don't fare any better, ranking 25th in passing yards per game. Geno has been sacked on 9% of his dropback, which ranks 27th. Simply put, the Chargers are my favorite streaming option for Week 13. Let's keep moving. Move over to the Jaguars versus the Titans. This is the flow chart play of the week. Anytime you can stream a defense against the Titans, I know it didn't really work out well last week, but that is not going to change this play for this week. Jags DST continues to be one of the more underrated defenses this year. They are currently number 9 overall scoring fantasy defense, averaging 7.7 fantasy points per game. They've also scored 11 or more fantasy points in half their games this year. And now they get one of the best matchups you could ask for. The Titans' offense has been terrible through most of this season. Overall, the Titans allow the most fantasy points to opposing defenses. Jags are a top 10 scoring defense for me this week. Next up is going to be the Dolphins. Every week we try to highlight a widely available defense. This week it's the Miami Dolphins, who are rostered just 3% of leagues. The Dolphins have quietly put up top 8 production in 3 of their last 4 games. The Saints offense has averaged just 15.5 points per game and have also allowed the 6th most fantasy points to defense. While there is always volatility with a defense like the Dolphins, they do look like a defense that we can utilize over the next couple of weeks because they get great matchups against not just the Saints, but then the Jets after that. So I do think the Dolphins are a defense you could use over the next few weeks. Lastly, we got a little bonus DST for you here. I don't know why I like to hurt, but I'm going to go back to them again because the last time I went to the Falcons, it didn't work out as well. But either way, the Falcons, to start the year, only accumulated 15 sacks through their first 8 games. However, over their last 4 games, they have 23 sacks. Overall, the DST 10, and have put up 10 or more fantasy points in 3 of their last 4 games. Next up is another great matchup against the Jets, who are devoid of much offensive talent and have allowed the 7th most fantasy points to opposing defenses. If the Falcons are still sitting out there, I think they are somebody you could also look to add as they are a top 10 defense for me. Let's move over to the kickers, and we're going to start with Cairo Santos. Santos converted his only field goal this past Sunday, as well as all 4 of his PATs for 8 fantasy points. He was good for kicker 14. Since returning from injury in Week 8, Santos is averaging 10.4 fantasy points per game, which is good for kicker 7. On the season, Santos has converted 81% of his field goals, which ranks top 12. Santos has also been a reliable weekly producer and has the 11th best remaining schedule for kickers. This week, the Bears take on the Eagles on Black Friday. This game is a 44.5 point total, and the Eagles allow the 7th most fantasy points to kickers. Next up, let's move over to Andy Borregales, rostered in 31% of leagues. Borregales has been on an absolute heater the last 4 weeks. He's converted 87.5% of his field goals and is averaging 9.5 fantasy points per game, which is good for kicker 5 overall during that span. Regardless, has had a slow start to the year where he was just the kicker 19 in fantasy points per game. He will look to ride a hot streak this week against the Giants. This game opened up with a healthy 47.5 point total. The Giants also allowed the 10th most fantasy points to kickers. It's worth noting the Patriots also have the easiest remaining schedule for kickers, making Borregales a strong rest of season option. Next up, let's move over to Harrison Mevis. The thicker kicker has finally unleashed on Sunday night against the Bucs. After their first 2 weeks of him being limited to just PATs, Mevis was asked to kick some field goals, and he came through converting a 40-plus yarder and a 50-plus yarder. He also converted all 4 PATs for 13 fantasy points. He ended up as the kicker 4 in Week 12. The rookie kicker will look to keep things going this week against the Panthers on the road. This game is a healthy 46.5-point total. And kicking for one of the best offenses in the league, which is also a big plus. Mevis is a top 12 option for me in week 13. Lastly, is going to be Zane Gonzalez. Zane Gonzalez took over as the Falcons kicker in week 10. Since then, he's been the kicker 4, averaging 11 fantasy points per game. One of the pluses has been that he's already converted 6 field goals of 40 or 50 plus yards, which is more than any kicker over that span. Next up for Gonzalez is a road matchup against the Jets. The Jets have been a phenomenal matchup for kickers all season, as they've allowed 10.9 fantasy points per game, which is the most of any team this season. So that being said, if you have any questions, let us know in the comments section below. Sure to get to them. If you celebrate Thanksgiving, have a great Thanksgiving. If you don't, enjoy the free football on Thursday. We got a lot of great football coming up this weekend and on Thanksgiving. So enjoy it. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.